guess he was surprised that Reed wasn't there.
Yeah, I wasn't at the,
He would have been, he would have coached him as a freshman.
Okay, this is running.
can you, does it have audio too?
Would Gilly would have coached
Gilly
him?
would have coached me,
No, Gilly was a library coach. When I went to Yale, Gilly was a library coach.
I was always
Was
a
it,
freshman.
when was Gilly's first year as a freshman coach was 55?
Was he your freshman coach, Tommy?
No, we had a guy named,
Well, he would have come right
Al
after
Long.
you then.
You had Al Long.
we had Al Long.
Well, he would have come right
He only
after.
coached 1 year. Because Al thought he was gonna get the,
Varsity.
Al thought he was gonna get the Navy job.
Oh,
And he,
from Rusty Callow?
because he was on.
Ann, why don't you turn that light
And it
on?
was known that Rusty was
The
leaving.
light on.
So he thought he wouldn't go to
I
Navy.
think it'll,
Because we're kind of in the shadow here.
He thought if he'd go to Navy and be Rusty's understudy for a year, and then Rusty would go, and he'd get the Navy job, but it never happened. I mean, he never got the Navy job, I don't,
He continued to coach, I think.
yeah, he ended up coaching at a Catholic school somewhere, I ran into him a number of times.
He was a pretty nice guy.
He was a good guy, he was a good guy.
Yeah.
He was very immature. He was more like an
I'm not
oarsman
sure that would help.
than a coach. But, yeah, it was a lot of fun to row for. Very enthusiastic. And I think he's been,
I guess,
I
go.
think he's been a good one. He's a nice
Well,
fellow.
the best I can do. So let's just go with that and see what we get. So, we're back.
To the story of,
We're back to Bob's story of Jim Rashmit in 1957, Henley.
Yeah, right.
I think we got to speak up.
Oh, okay. Well, this was like 20 years later after we rode in 57 at Henley.
Yeah.
And Cornell ended up winning that race. And we had tied or something, virtually tied in the sprints.
Dead heat,
Dead heat.
practically in the sprints.
Right. So, you know, stroking that boat, when you get into the last 500 meters, and if you believe what Jim always taught us, which was do what you have to do to win. We never had a full course strategy, at least with me. I never had a full course strategy. Stay with him to the 1,000-meter mark, and then after that, try to get ahead of him by the 500. But in any case, in the last 500, do whatever you have to do to win. So that was one of the things that was in my head. And another thing that was in my head was the psychology of focus and discipline. In other words, you had to be completely focused to operate at maximum performance, but you had to have the discipline to sustain that kind of performance over the course. So those things were always, and it wasn't just Yale I learned that from rowing at Exeter my senior year. But anyhow, so here it is, 1977, yes, and I went back to Yale this. And Jim was back there, and neither of us went out to the course or watch it on the bank or one of the boats. We decided we'd stay up on a platform, an outdoor platform that they have on the second floor of where the boathouse is and where the freshmen used to live. So we're sitting out there talking during all three races. And we spent a lot of time talking. And one of the subjects was I was always didn't understand why when we got into the last part of the Henley race, you know, we do what you have to do, and so we went up. And when we used to go up in that other boat, when we'd go up, you could feel that boat really start to move faster than it was already moving. It always moved when we went up. When we went up at Henley, they were going it just kept even. There was no surge. And we ended up losing the race by what? How long was it?
Probably a length.
Yeah, about a length. And so the conclusion I came to was that race, the difference in that race was whatever the difference was in the crew
You're comparing that to the,
to the 56
six.
boat. And the big difference in that boat from 56 was that we had planned on Max Grimes, rowing in 57, but when he became a senior, he had completed all his work at Yale, and he dropped out of school and didn't row in the 57 boat, and I always felt for years that if he had been in that boat, we would have mopped up on
well,
Cornell.
there have been two that you lost in the
Yeah, there were two, but,
I think for sure.
yeah.
so, that was the conclusion I had. But thinking back about this business of focus and discipline, we got on that subject, and I finally asked Jim, what was the real difference in those two boats in terms of the people? And he brought up the subject that one of the people in the boat that had replaced was not disciplined during the entire that entire year. And that's an assumption when you get to that level in rowing, where you automatically assume that everyone is totally focused. They're totally giving whatever necessary to win these races. And that includes training, that includes taking care of yourself, that includes all that frame of reference physically. And it turns out that this guy, and Jim told me this guy was not training like the rest of the people. In fact, he was leaving the college and going up and visiting a girlfriend or something like that. During that year, during the racing season, I was so conceptually undone. I just couldn't conceive that anybody wouldn't be doing what we always did, which was, did we get involved with women during the racing season? No. Did we get involved with
Did you
any
all have
kind
big
of
girlfriends
distractions?
during the racing time?
Well, we all had girlfriends,
It was totally secondary. I mean, it didn't count in terms of this business about focus. But then you get to discipline, to having the discipline not to stay focused. That's a death wish. If anybody is unfocused and not disciplined in the boat, it's a disaster. The boat's not gonna win.
All it takes is one.
And it took me 20 years to find that out. Now, I've met the guy a couple of times. I could barely shake his hands.
but well, I don't
And
wanna
he's a
know,
good guy.
I don't wanna know who it is, because
No, I'm not mentioning any names,
I
but
don't wanna know.
it just totally undone me when I heard that story. Not from just an idle person.
But
It's
Jim
coming
knew.
from Jim.
But
Jim
Jim-
knew.
Jim-
He never said anything to any of us.
And,
And it's
Well, you lost,
20 years
you
later.
lost 4 guys out of the 56 boat.
Yeah.
You
He
lost 4.
mentioned one
You lo-
guy.
You lost Tommy, you lost Dave White, you
Right,
lost Charlie, and
Yeah.
and yours truly.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, those 4.
poor guy's gone.
But there was one guy of the replacements that was
Was it Wilberding in that boat?
not
yeah,
totally
Yeah,
focused.
he was-
Denver's in the bow.
Yeah.
he played second fiddle for me until I graduated.
Yeah.
He moved right in my seat.
Yeah.
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 And, another thing that happened to me in 56, which was, we were, coming off of our my sophomore year, and we were practicing in the fall and so on. And then when they started to put that boat together in the spring, Jim came to me, I think it was maybe March, and believe it or not, he said to me, Bob, he said, I don't want you to get too close to anybody in that boat. Everybody's camaraderie and so on and so forth. He essentially said, do not get real close to anybody in that boat until we have the boat. And basically what he was saying is, I don't want to see anything happen to you psychologically if somebody you're very close to doesn't make the boat. And that's when I concluded if I kept doing what I was doing, I was the last stroke of that boat. No coach would ever come to me and say something like that. That was a sort of it meant a lot to me. But I never was that, even in the freshman boat, I was trying to stay away from that kind of sensitivity.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know,
Yeah.
in the end, how the thing is going to be voted. That's the real thing. We didn't know in the freshman year whether the story about John Cook making that vote for the Harvard-Yale race was a good example of, you know,
Well, we had no idea, John almost didn't go to the ferry with us.
I know that.
In your freshman year?
Yeah. He started rowing.
But didn't he row in
literally.
the freshman boat?
Yes.
He didn't row in the fall of his freshman year. He
Right.
started in the spring
Then he
of his
was-
freshman year and was in the Olympic trial 1 year later.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever been able to do that in 1 year, go from nothing.
Hadn't he been rowing in school before?
No,
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 no.
he was a
football
Went to
player.
Ansonia High School.
He went to high school, he was,
And he was an all-state football player.
his,
How did he do that?
because he was a football player and he was expected to play football at Yale.
He was injured in the fall or something, couldn't go out for freshman football. And one of the people that he lived with said, well, why don't you go out for
Because
rowing? in the
Ansonia
spring?"
and Derby are right there at the boat where we rowed. So he'd seen the boats and he knew about rowing.
You know, Gilly didn't invite him to come up to the ferry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the freshman coach did not invite him up
How,
to the ferry.
so he didn't go to the ferry?
Well, he did go to the ferry, but only because he went up to Gilly and he says, geez, Gilly, I live in Ansonia, and him and Hod and Gilly said he felt so badly about it. He finally said, well, okay, John.
Was he in the boat by then? Was he in the
No,
boat?
no, he was not in the boat at all.
Well, when did he get in the boat? Up at the
ferry.
He got.
Oh,
he,
yeah.
he brought the boats together and said.
No, bringing the boats
That's
together.
another story. That's when
That's
the-
another story. That's later.
That's
That's
a
later.
incredible
But,
story.
but no, John came to the ferry only because Gilly didn't have the heart to tell the kid he couldn't come. So he goes up to the ferry, and of course we hadn't won a race. I think we had a dead heat with Penn in some race.
Or
Hadn't won a thing.
Your
And
boat.
Harvard had won the Eastern Sprints and was undefeated,
Right.
right? And that's when we mixed our boat around, and moved Rusty into 7. Cookie was 5. I forget who was, Charlie Stafford was 6. Peter Bohacek was in, I forget who else was in the boat.
Yeah.
But the boat
Well, where was Essie?
all of a sudden clicked at Gales Ferry.
That was a freshman crew,
Freshman crew.
the freshman.
Our
crew.
freshman crew.
Freshman crew.
Freshman crew. The first time, well, you and I had been together, but Rusty hadn't been in the 7 seat before.
That's right.
I think we moved Rusty into the 7
Huge
seat
difference.
for the
Huge
first time.
difference.
Made all the difference in the world.
Right.
And John went in the boat at the 5 seat, and suddenly we had some power in the boat.
You beat Harvard, I know. you did.
Well, we beat Harvard by
Oh, yeah.
a little open water.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, too much.
So Essie, you came in the next year.
No, I was there that year, but I was ahead of them. I was.
But-
You were in the varsity that
but-
year.
Oh, you were in the.
But we're 2 years, 3 years apart.
Yeah,
Oh, 3?
yeah, because these guys are sophomores.
2 years apart.
We were
2 years
56,
apart.
we're
We're
2
2
years,
years
2 years apart.
Tom and I were seniors. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna tell you about the Amlongs, because that's a funny story. Change the subject. a little bit.
Let me see if this thing is recording. Yeah.
How do you know when you run out? Does it go beep beep?
Well, I don't know.
Anyway, the Amlongs were famous, infamous